Well, welcome. KIN 467, Sport Performance Testing. I created this course for a couple of reasons. I'm Dr. John Mercer. I've created this course for a couple of reasons. One is I used to teach a graduate level instrumentation class. And in that class, I would work with graduate students to teach them the ins and outs of how equipment operated because they need to know a high level of detail for their research projects. And we would also work on data processing techniques as well. And that is a neat thing to sort of carry over to this course. And you'll see some of those lectures, by the way, where we go into we do a deep dive on instruments and how they operate. Because the way the instrument behaves ultimately helps us understand how to use the data that we get from the instrument. And so I've always loved instrumentation techniques and measuring techniques, and so this class is partly born out of that. But the other reason that I created this class was in recognition of how sports science has really exploded. And it's exploded for a couple of reasons. One is the increase in portable technology that has allowed measurements of athletes in field situations we'll be able to do measurements of athletes in field situations and get data. And then the other reason why sports science has exploded is to help train is for the reason of using science to help identify the best way to train someone, as well as how to minimize the risk of injury. And if someone is injured, what's the best practice to rehab them? And so, given the explosion of sports science, which is really hinged on technology, I thought I'd create this class. And in this class, what you will be able to do is get hands-on experience working with a wide range of equipment that we actually take out right now for field testing that we do with professional athletes, with K through 12 kids, and also for research. And also, you'll see how we take sports science out for demonstration for education purposes for K through 12 students. And so, selfishly, part of the reason for doing this class, as well as the class in the fall, Sport Foundation or Foundation of Sports Science, is to really teach students how to get engaged in these sports science opportunities. So, for example, we're working to set up a combine test with the Las Vegas Lights at the end of January, beginning of February. And what I want to do is be able to take you folks to be part of that combine testing of professional athletes. Now, in order to get you ready for that type of test, we need to do some training. Given that combine will happen within the next 2 or 3 weeks, it's not a lot of time to train you fully on all the different instruments, but we start with how do you operate equipment? How do you make sure data has been saved? What instructions do you need to give to athletes when they're doing a particular test? So there's some, low-hanging fruit there in terms of what we'll tackle first in order to get you ready for participating in a combine test. And sometimes the first combine, we actually just put you aside and say, just watch all this, all right? And then as you do more of them, you start learning the instruments, learning how to interact with the athletes, learning ultimately how to process data. So that's sort of a foundation for why this course was created. It is a hybrid format, so we will be meeting both in person and remotely. I have worked out that about a third of the class is in person, and I have a separate video on the syllabus. I lay out the course calendar so you can book those in-person dates into your calendar. I know most of you will probably be commuting, but I try to set that schedule, and then I try to stick with that. The rest of the time will be remote, and remote will be via Zoom meetings, much like we'll have as we start the course. But then I also post all the videos for the course, and you're able to watch the videos at your schedule. But I do recommend that you block out both the days of the week and the times for this class in your calendar. And that way you know that you have time to dedicate to this class, either to attend a Zoom session, an in-person session, or even to watch some videos. All right, so in this presentation, what I want to do is just sort of go over a big picture of the course and talk a little bit about background information that you may need, or some of the background information that we're going to cover. Let me share my screen. All right, so this is sport performance testing, KIN 467. And again, I'm Dr. John Mercer. If you took Foundations of Sports Science, you saw this figure several times. And the idea behind this figure is to emphasize that sports science is an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary topic. Interdisciplinary meaning that sports scientists work with a wide range of people directly. Multidisciplinary is people working in separate areas, and then they ultimately bring information together. And this is a nice model from a paper. Here's the citation down here, where you have the athlete in the center, and you've got all these circles. Some of them are labeled, lots of them are not labeled, but you have biomechanics, applied epidemiology, education, data science, physiology, performance assessment, management, brain health, research and innovation. These are sort of some core areas. These are not all of them, okay? And then in an inner circle, you have more people more likely to be connected with an athlete: coaching, strength and conditioning, mental health and performance, sports science, nutrition, and sports medicine. And then you got all these other little circles that are remained undefined, but they all influence the athlete in some way, shape, or form. And so this trying to help an athlete improve performance, maintain performance, rehab from an injury, minimize the risk of an injury, anything related to performance is interdisciplinary. We need information from all these different areas, because we can individually never be an expert in all the different areas that influence an athlete. You know, being a sports psychologist and a sport biomechanist, although there's a lot in common, those are two areas that are highly specialized. And it makes sense to work with colleagues who are experts in different areas, but work together to ultimately help the athlete. And so you'll hear this theme throughout this course as well, is that we're going to zero in on testing of athletes, and we're going to talk about instruments, but we can't lose sight that sports science as a field is very interdisciplinary, and we will need to pull for expertise from different areas to ultimately help the athlete. So I also use this elephant story, and I tell it in another presentation, just to emphasize the importance of interdisciplinary work. So the way this elephant parable goes is, in this cartoon, you have, six scientists that are blindfolded, and they're told to go into a room and figure out what object is in the room. And each scientist grabs it inadvertently, a different part of the object. This one says, oh, I got the object, and says it's a rope. This one says, oh, no, it's a wall. This one says, no, it's a fan, it's a spear, it's a snake, it's a tree, whatever. And the parable is told a little differently in different examples. But in essence, each one of them grabbed a different part of the object, and each one of them was correct in one sense, but incorrect overall. It's not a tree, it's an elephant. And the only way to figure out that it's an elephant is that they take their blindfolds off, and then they share the information of each other that each of them has to ultimately identify, well, no, it's not a snake. Really, this is only part of the object, and ultimately they identify that it's an elephant. And so that's what happens here. Here's my model of what represents kinesiology. So we're all interested in performance, and I go through this in another presentation, all interested in performance, how well we do something, how fast we run a 5K, how well we throw a ball, how well we catch a ball, whatever it is. Well, performance is nothing more than a bunch of movements, which is functional anatomy. A movement from a physics perspective is displacement in some time period. In Brownian mechanics, we call that, or physics, we call that kinematics, the study of motion. Displacements are in some time period are caused by forces. We study forces in the branch of mechanics called kinetics. Forces, from a human perspective, are generated by muscles. We also have external forces like gravity or something hitting a person or ground pushing on the person. But internally, and muscles is broad. I mean, tendons, ligaments. But in essence, this is what's generating forces that's causing a displacement in time of some segment, and that segment has a movement associated with it, a name, elbow flexion, extension, what have you, and put those movements together in a particular way, we have a performance. There's lots of things that influence muscle. We need to know energy systems. We need to know anaerobic system, aerobic system. We need to know things like length, tension relationship, force velocity relationship, things like that to really understand what muscles can do. And we got coordination of muscle and what have you. And ultimately, we have the central nervous system, or nervous system in general, is controlling what muscles do, which is to generate forces, cause a displacement time, which is a movement, elbow flexion, extension, internal, external rotation, what have you, which is nothing more than the foundation of a performance. And then I have environment up on top here, because the environment, it could be, environment like you'd look up on weather.com, air temperature, wind, humidity, what have you. But the environment is anything external to the person. Lighting, competition, pressure, the crowd, and so forth. Those things can influence what the central nervous system does, which can influence what the muscles do, which influences the forces, which influences the displacement in time, which influences the movement. Ultimately, we're coming up with performance. And if there's something that's influencing the person in a negative way, I always say, I can go to my backyard and I can give 8 out of 10 free throws. But if I get called down during a game halftime and I have to shoot free throws in front of 10, 20,000 people, I'm not going to make 8 out of 10, right? There's something that's going on that's changing the signal that's going to the muscles, ultimately influencing the forces, the displacement, the movements, and ultimately the performance. And I have an area of performance. So to learn kinesiology, which is your degree, there's all these different specialty areas. Each one of these is a blindfolded scientist, sports medicine, motor learning, anatomy and physiology, biomechanics, nutrition, exercise physiology, motor control, sports psychology. These are all areas that people specialize in, but to understand performance, we need all of these areas to ultimately understand others as well. So you'll hear this interdisciplinary theme quite a lot through this course. What we're going to do in this class is zero in on how to measure some of these things along this pipeline that ultimately influence performance. And the other theme that you're going to hear about in this class is we're going to take a research approach. We're going to take an approach which is reliant on the scientific method. And I've got a presentation on this. But the scientific method is an objective way to test out ideas. And we want to keep that in our mind, that the sports science area has that science part. And we want to be very good scientists at the end of the day as we go through this course. And this includes things like what we're going to do is logical when we're doing our testing or when we're doing our measurements. The procedures make sense. The conclusions are make sense. They relate back to the empirical data, and the empirical data just means something that's been connected or collected, as opposed to anecdotes, which are stories. I'm a runner. I run in this brand shoe, therefore everybody should run in that brand shoe. No, that's anecdotal information. Empirical evidence would be trying to determine what's the right shoe for a particular person. It has to be reductive, that we're generating general relationships, and whatever testing we do or experiment we do has to be replicable. And so we'll really keep leaning back to a research approach as we go through this class. And as you learn instruments, you'll learn different layers of information of the instrument, how to turn it on, how to turn it off, how to push record, how to stop record, but then you'll learn some of the details that are really important when we're trying to do a research study or to come up with accurate information that sports scientists can use to help decisions for athletes. Another model, and you'll see this throughout this course and other courses that I teach actually, that I think is important because you're gonna start seeing a lot of different tools that we can use in the lab, and there's more. Our lab is actually really well equipped, but there's far more tools than even what we have in our lab. And what we got to keep remembering is the tool that we're going to use has to be selected for some specific reasons. Now, I use this model to explain some of the performance aspects of movement, in that the body is a storage of chemical energy, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. That's what this is. It's stored potential energy in the sense of chemical bonds. And there's different ways to store fat and so forth. Well, we can quantify some of this by doing things like body comp. We have people stand on a special scale the way that we do it, and we're able to identify how much fat a person has in the body. Or we could use an instrument like a continuous blood glucose monitor to figure out what type of glucose there is in the blood at any stage of practice or training, or even during off-training periods. And so this is important because what our body does is it takes that potential chemical energy and transforms that potential chemical energy to mechanical energy. This is energy of movement. This is where forces are being applied, and we're actually moving the body or moving an object or what have you. And the way our body transforms the energy from one state to another is through the aerobic and anaerobic pathways. Over here in this red area, you've taken courses on this probably in sport nutrition or other nutrition courses if you're interested in that area. In this column, this is all about the metabolic pathways that transform that chemical energy to mechanical energy. You'll probably learn this in anatomy and physiology, 391 exercise physiology, or other physiology-based courses. But here we're interested in how to improve these pathways through training, frequency, intensity, time, and modality of training. We can train the aerobic system to be better. We can train the anaerobic system to perform better. And when I say perform better, meaning that we can transform either more chemical energy to mechanical energy, or we can transform this chemical energy to mechanical energy even faster. And we can monitor training through tools like heart rate, measuring power, or a psychology tool like rating of perceived exertion. But we have other ways to measure athlete load. We have activity trackers. We can put sensors on a person during practice, and we can figure out how much acceleration and deceleration periods they have to understand the stress that they may be under during a practice or a game situation. So there's a lot of tools that we use to sort of tap into this column. And then on the mechanical energy side, this is the movement side. This is where we have a propulsion force or some force that's going to cause movement. And that force is applied with a certain magnitude and in a certain direction and in coordination with other things that are generating forces, multiple muscles, or maybe some external forces as well. And a lot of times for the other courses I teach, which is on endurance performance, I really zero in on resistive forces and movement forces or propelling forces. And there, we're interested in things that resist movement and things that allow movement to happen. And a lot of times this is why we do drills, is to learn how to coordinate different muscles in a way to generate the right force at the right time in the right direction. Well, we have a lot of sensors that can measure lots of things in this column, from kinetic instruments, measuring forces, to kinematics, which is measuring the movement. We'll go through a lot of those instruments. And so at some point in the semester, we'll be saying, well, why would we want to use this instrument? Or we would frame it a little different. We would say, oh, we want to know this about the athlete. What instrument are we going to select to know this? And what we might want to know is in one of these three columns, most likely. And I got injury down here too, because injury is important, that we're trying to minimize the risk of injury through training, optimize the benefits. And if someone is injured, then we just got to have a way to rehab them. And I use this slide as well. You'll see this several times. But the whole idea behind this slide, this is a paper that we wrote on using wearable technology for circus performing movements, trying to quantify circus performance movements. And to identify the right tool to use, there's a lot of things that we need to, a lot of questions we need to have answers to. What type of data do we need? Is the instrument, does it need to work with any other type of system? How accessible are the data? When we're using a portable system, a lot of times we're limited to the information that we can get out of proprietary software, where a company won't give us the raw data, they'll give us some process data. We don't even know often what the processing steps were. And so we ought to understand that. We need to know how durable instruments are, how well they actually are able to collect data out in the field. Cost and availability of instruments makes an impact on decisions. Comfort and fit. We don't want to be using instruments that interfere with the athletes moving. And then device accuracy and reliability. These things all come into play when we start trying to identify the type of instrument we're going to use to quantify some type of movement. And in the circus world, these are very unique type of movements. And so a lot of times you need unique type of instruments. The other thing to keep in mind is, as we're doing testing of athletes, is why are we doing the testing? And often the reason for why we're testing is we're trying to help athletes move into this quadrant of being a healthy athlete and a high-performing athlete. This is a model based upon this citation down here, where we have performance on the x-axis and health on the y-axis. And health can be physical health, it could be mental health, financial health. It also comes into play when we start talking about name, image, likeness issues that may influence an athlete in some way, shape, or form in terms of performance or pressure to perform, what have you. But in essence, we really want our athletes up in this quadrant, that they're healthy and they're high performing. We want to move them away from being healthy and an underperformer, unhealthy and underperformer, and unhealthy and high performer. So really, this is the goal, is to move people up into this quadrant. And so we try to take an objective way to do that, and we use lots of different instruments to measure different aspects of an athlete, from mental health to physical health, to ultimately come up with a game plan to move them into that high performer. And I should say, high performer doesn't just mean elite athletes. This class is not limited to discussing and measuring only elite athletes. Yes, we'll do some of that, but the vast majority of you, when you're out in the real world, you most likely will be working with age groupers who want to be able to run better and avoid running overuse injuries. Or you may be working with age group athletes on different sports, from baseball hitting to pitching to kicking or what have you. And so it's not always elite performer. We're not always just talking high performer from a world record perspective, but more so, what's high performing for me? And that may lead to a different set of things that we would measure, and ultimately information we get back to me to help me maximize my performance as opposed to an elite athlete. Maybe Wait, did I just say I'm not an elite athlete? Oh, well. All right. So just sort of a schematic here on what we're doing. We're going to use the scientific method. We're going to use lots of different tools to generate lots of different information, but we're going to apply that information in a way to help sport. Your job as the student is to learn a lot of these different instruments. I'm going to give you access to quite a few instruments in this semester, but it's a tip of the iceberg. And the knowledge that we'll be able to pull out for each of the instruments is really just the beginning. And the more you get into sport performance testing, the more advantage you will have in understanding instrumentation when you're trying to interpret the data. One of the things that we're going to do throughout this course is we're going to engage in the community, or with the community, and the community being anything external to UNLV. It may be K through 12, where we go out and we demonstrate sports science to high school kids or elementary school kids. And we try to show them that there are sports science careers that they can pursue outside of wanting to be an athlete. And we talk about the different academic pathways that the students can pursue when they go to college. And so we also go out in the community and work with our professional teams. We've done combine testing with the Vegas Golden Knights. We've assisted what the Vegas Golden Knights scientists do. We've gone and worked with the Las Vegas Desert Dogs, Las Vegas Lights, a tennis combine out at Lake Las Vegas. We worked with a National Rugby League who came to town, and we helped them with their combine. So we'll go out and actually work with high-performing athletes. We work with Cirque du Soleil artists, and we test some of them as well and do some research on some of their performances. And so part of this class will be to get out in the field and actually learn how to use the instruments in the real world. And at the end of the day, the information in this class is only one part of becoming the next generation of sports scientists. And I hope you'll enjoy this class. Working with the instruments is fun. It's not easy, but it is incredibly exciting to see the different types of tools that we can use to quantify movement and help athletes. Okay, so that's big picture perspective of the course, and hopefully that helps. And I will either see you on the Zoom call or in person next. Thanks so much.